Boom, boom, boom. Welcome to Solo Kapoor's podcast. And today's topic is my first foray into controversial topics. In a sense, I've always been playing safe all this while on this podcast for almost in the past 38 episodes. Now's the time to dip some toes in the hot water and get myself baptized. For the troll on the head that's going to come for this, hopefully not, because hopefully we will be able to make sense. And to make sense with me is one of my favorite film critic writers, Tanul Thakur, is here on the podcast. Thank you very much, Tanul, for doing this.
Thank you.
Tanul Thakur is a film critic writes for Sunday Guardian. Were you a former writer, or you still are a guest writer there?
Yeah, I used to work for the Sunday Guardian. Then I freelance, and for the last 4.5 years, I've been a film critic for The Wire.
Right, and yeah, you write for The Wire, so anti-national, and goes without saying. You can expect that from his social media accounts. Obviously, is that he has the tag of the official Dhoni hater, right? And so we are here to talk about. I wouldn't call it interesting, but I would call it a weird topic to talk about, which is the fan kingdoms of India, and how we adore authoritative figures in general, right? Before getting started with that, let me just we're gonna cuss a lot on Dhoni, not in the sense of bad words, but the thing is, before we get started with that, we have to acknowledge, right? Dhoni, when he came down, he was the boon, right? Because I was listening to your podcast with Rahul Desai, and you said one word. You said, like, when we saw Dhoni, it was like, bro, behave yourself. You are an Indian wicketkeeper, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I just take one small objection, not small, more than a small objection in categorizing me as a Dhoni hater. I definitely am not a Dhoni hater. I know
I was
you
just
were
kidding.
but yeah, no, I get it. But just for the listeners out there, I mean, I, as any other Indian cricket fan and follower, have a huge respect, admiration, and a lot of love for Dhoni, and it just goes beyond cricket. I think so. Dhoni is from Ranchi, right? I'm from Dhanbad. I saw Dhoni's that swashbuckling 148 against Pakistan in Vizag while I was in school in a hostel in Bokaro, and we used to watch matches because we did not have TV back then. This is mid 2000s. We did not have TV in our PGs and things like that. So we would locate a nearest medical store which would be telecasting matches for not just himself, but for some 30, 40 people flocking near his shop. And that was the first time. I mean, we had heard about, there's this guy from Ranchi, from Jharkhand. There was a bit of a regional pride there because Jharkhand had not had any representation in cricket. Sure, there was Syed Sabakarim as a wicketkeeper, but he did play a few matches, but not a lot. So we had heard of this new kid and all of that, and we were very excited. And I thought that even if he makes something like 40 or 50, a quick 40 or 50, it would be great. Especially because, and obviously this went beyond some bit of regional pride, because India never had an attacking wicketkeeper. You can just trace it right from. I mean, Farooq Engineer was fine, but not somebody. Or I mean, you can keep going down the line, right? So there was Saeed Kirmani, Kiran More. These people at least were stable, and there was, of course, no culture of wicketkeepers being these brute hitters as well. So till then it was fine, but in the period that was the 90s after Naeem Mongia, it was a pretty. We were all over the place, right? There was MSK Prasad, there was Deep Das Gupta. People came and went, and there was Ajay Ratra, and nobody really stuck around. And we had almost assumed that a wicketkeeper is, if not a walking wicket, at least somebody who would just hang around, just accumulate a few runs, and that would be it. There were no expectations as such. Adam Gilchrist had started to really shine over the last few years, but you really did not expect that from Indian wicketkeepers, let's be honest, right?
Hmm.
And so when we saw that match, and when I saw that match, and he made 148, he could have made a bloody 200, right? He got
Yep.
out in the 40th over, and he was on 150, 148, and everybody was thinking Saeed Anwar 194, Saeed Anwar
Exactly.
194, things like that, And after that, you just saw Dhoni, who he was, right?
Yep.
2007 T20, 2011 World Cup, 2013 Champions Trophy, bunch of things. So you obviously grew up. I grew up admiring the guy, and
Hmm.
I had a lot of fondness and admiration for him. But then you are also a thinking brain, right? I mean, it's not as if I have submitted my thinking faculty to Dhoni or anybody else in this world, right? Including my parents. I see things for what they are, uh, to my limited ability or whatever that may be. I interpret things. I seek out evidences. I basically see and interpret things on my own. And from 2017 onwards, things were not making sense. Let's be honest.
Hmm.
Fall of 2017, August, September, or something. I remember thinking that Dhoni is not been performing to the level that he should be, and I'd seen that story before. If you remember Sachin Tendulkar
Yes.
again, I mean the greatest batsman till 2011 April,
Yes.
when India won the World Cup. Just absolutely, there is no saying that, disputing that. But after that, from 11 April to 2013 November, he just wasn't. I mean, even a patch of the batsman that he was, right?
Hmm.
And that did not make sense. And I'd seen that if you tell that to people, if you point out flaws, if you express frustration, if you express some sort of anger, even betrayal, people were just not ready. And the same happened with Dhoni. In fact, I do not think that Dhoni should have been a part of the 2019 World Cup squad.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I mean, he was great behind the stumps. He was always a very good keeper. With Kuldeep and Chahal, he was absolutely phenomenal in guiding them, and things like that. He was a bit of a leader as well, helping
Hmm.
Kohli and all of that. But you also need to really justify your place in the side by other means as well, right? You can't just be, I mean, just a bit of this and a bit of that. Dhoni was just not performing as a batsman. Sure, in 2019 January, you can say that he was. I mean, he was the man of the series against Australia, but they really weren't those Dhoni knocks that you think. And there were several failed chases, or I mean, instances, both
2000,
in T20 and
2019
in.
2019 World Cup, India versus England.
Definitely. I'm talking even before,
Mm-hmm.
in between 2016 to 2019, if you see, there were at least 4 to 5 instances where Dhoni was at the center and we lost the match. He couldn't see us through and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember there was this one match against West Indies in West Indies or in Fort Lauderdale where
Yeah, yeah,
we
yeah.
were chasing 245 and 20 overs. And I think KL Rahul and some other batsmen, they played so phenomenally. Dhoni needed 8 to win of the last over. He couldn't see us through, and bunch of other examples, stuff such as having absolutely no intent, and just taking things right down to the wire, and not succeeding in clearing the line. So
Let,
that's where my sorry, I'll
let,
just
let
come.
me let
I'll
me
just finish. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
let me guess. When you were watching the 2020 IPL, you were like, what did I tell you?
So, so yeah, I'll tell you this. I never watch IPL. Okay,
Uh-huh.
it's just something, and it's not coming from a place of disdain or condescension, not at all. It has some great cricketing talents or whatever, but it just so happens that it doesn't really gel well with me. I'm not that
Uh-huh.
interested. I think the last IPL I saw was in 2010.
Huh.
Uh,
But
this IPL,
you're aware of
more
CSK's
or less aware.
exploits. Yeah.
Of course, obviously. And so I'll tell so I'll tell you this. In 2019, the match against England, when
Hmm.
I was talking to a few friends, and just in general, I could see that people were just not seeing what I was seeing. That this is not good batting. I mean, this is terrible, in fact. and not just friends or not, and otherwise sensible people,
Look, they lost that match because they didn't want Pakistan to go to semis. Come on.
probably. I don't know. I mean, I am not very I'm not
Like,
very certain about that theory, but yeah, could be. I
no, I
mean,
mean, I was at the ground in Edgbaston for that match, and I think,
oh,
yeah, I think they bowled really well. They were phenomenal with them, and I had no clue what they were doing. There was one over against, I don't know if you vividly remember that match, but I remember that. And there was one particular over where Adil Rashid was bowling somewhere in the 40th over, and I thought this is it. I thought this is it. Dhoni and Hardik Pandya will go bonkers like Hardik Pandya went in 2017 Champions Trophy final, right? And they didn't do
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And I had no clue if they were playing for 60 out of 60 balls or 90 out of 60 balls. It didn't make sense.
Yeah, it was terrible. And in fact, that reminds me, I mean, that game was so terrible that it actually, in my memory and in my opinion, will rank right up there with Manoj Prabhakar's innings
Hmm.
against West Indies in 1994 when he made a shamelessly slow century while they were chasing something like 220 or not a very high total,
Hmm.
and they just weren't able to win the match because there was just no intent to win the match, and that was really problematic about that 2019
Well,
England World Cup.
right. I'm not worried about Dhoni's performance. I'm worried about the people who didn't find any issues with that. So my question is, do you think people were okay with their overstaying welcomes of these idols and legends? And why do you think that is the case?
See, I mean, the fact, I think, yeah, definitely, because what else would explain that, right? I mean, when you have all evidences pointing to the contrary, that something or somebody or an approach or a method is not working, and it's not as if it hasn't worked once.
Mm.
It's not as if it hasn't worked twice. It's a pattern of not working, and you can see this pattern over the years. And I think what really happens is, I think there is a genuine lack of role models in this country, and not just in cricket, I would say, but I think it extends across fields. I mean, in politics,
Hmm.
in tech, in say writing, journalism. I'm not saying that there are no role models at all. Of course not, but I also feel that. We do lack genuine torch bearers in large numbers, you know. So
Hmm.
then what happens is, so that's one, I think. Second is also the fact that we are a country of many gods,
Mm.
you know. The fact is, devotion comes pretty naturally to us.
Mm.
The sense of putting all our eggs in one basket, the sense of loyalty, the sense of, and also this 200 years of can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, it just showed that my internet connection is unstable. And also 200 years of British rule, right? That has, of course, taken away a lot from us. I mean, it takes away your confidence, it takes away your
Mm.
self-respect. Then your entire life as a nation and your entire life as a citizen of that nation is essentially an act of catching up. You're always in a state of becoming, and then if you take all these factors into account, uh, then essentially what happens is your sense of loyalty towards somebody, it's almost the sense of seeing somebody as your savior, right? And you have invested so much in that person, and that person could even be a film star, that person could even be a politician, and things like that. When you see a person as a savior, when you tie in when you tie in everything, or you invest so much in that person, then that person is just not an entity. That person becomes a part of you. That person
Mm.
starts to uh, so an attack against that person, or even say constructive criticism against that person, is a criticism of you.
Mm.
It becomes personal, I
Mm.
mean, as I said, I love Dhoni. I mean, I have nothing against him, and there is absolutely no denying the incredible contribution he's had towards Indian cricket and all of that. I mean, I am nobody to even endorse Dhoni's greatness.
I
But to answer,
I will answer
sorry,
the point that you were making. I'll answer my own experience. I used to be a Nolan fanatic, right? Christopher Nolan fanatic. All
yeah,
right. So
yeah,
it was not until I read one article by a critic called Jim Emerson on Roger Ebert's webpage. All right.
I love that. I love Emerson, very
Yeah,
good critic. Yeah,
and he literally lists down the list of nitpickings, right? So too many edits, too much exposition. All right, it's Nolan's movies are too mathematical and a little less emotional. And when I went through these points, right, and those were the days where we didn't have this echo chamber type of society that we are living in right now. I'll come to that point, but I didn't have an opposing view of Christopher Nolan until then, until I read that piece, and that kind of really that really toned down my fanaticism a little bit, right? So luck by chance encounter. But what can be done about? I mean, there is nothing to be done. I mean, who are we to do anything, anyways? But I'm really pointing out these unique fandoms, right? So, for example, I come from the state of Andhra Pradesh. People are mad about Pawan Kalyan here. There are mad Pawan Kalyan fans, mad Rajnikant fans, Salman Khan fans, and it's like their Modi, right? It's the extension of their own personality is like being their fan or something like that.
So I mean, I also, of course, do not have an answer, and I'm sure that's also not the question, as you said. What
Yeah.
can be done about it? But I think I do have a one word that can probably solve a lot of problems,
Hmm.
and that is employment.
Mm. Which is severely lacking in this country right now. And
Yeah, right.
yeah,
I, I mean, it's this literally this thing of get a job, man. I mean,
yeah,
I know. I mean, I'm kind of making a fun of something that has really
unfortunate.
reached dangerous proportions,
Yeah.
and it's really unfortunate. But and when I also say employment, I also mean it not just in literal terms, but also in metaphorical terms. That I think people should also invest in something, and which is also getting a job or doing something means, right? Invest in something that is also an expression of their own self,
Mm.
which is not necessarily tethered to an individual per se. I mean, of course, fandom is also an expression of one's own self. And I think it's one of the purest expressions. I really like the idea of fandom.
Mm.
I think, and I have a lot of respect again for fans. I mean,
Yes.
perhaps not for those who probably troll or abuse on Twitter or
Mm.
Facebook, or probably not for those who are just so obviously blind and they have almost or absolutely become bigoted, and they've become really insular,
Cultish.
uh, cultish as well. Not those, but I think fandom is an expression of love. I think
Mm.
it is some person trying to be vulnerable,
Mm.
because what is fandom? Fandom is essentially, in a sense, you going onto a rooftop per se, metaphorical rooftop, and in a sense screaming that I really like this person.
Mm.
And when you put something out there in such a manner in public domain,
Mm.
it does require a bit of courage. Sure, you can take a look at these Rajni fans, you can even take a look at these Salman Khan
Not
fans, any
not
kind of
condescending
fans.
them in any sense. It
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is
yeah.
just condescending when you can't accept any
The
finger
toxicity of
pointing.
it,
Yes, that's
the
toxic.
toxicity of it.
Exactly. Exactly. Well
Yeah,
put.
so I think, see, I think what is a problem is that when you invest so much of yourself,
Mm.
at the expense of obliterating your identity, at the expense of wiping out your entire, uh, sorry,
Can you repeat from that line, please? At the expense of your own, obliterating
uh,
at, yeah, right.
uh, I think what really happens is, in in fandoms that turn toxic uh, is essentially you obliterating your own sense of identity completely. I mean, it is this absolute submission. You are wiping out your own sense of mental faculty. You are, in a sense, degrading yourself so much that you do not exist. Only your object of adoration does. And I think that's a problem. I mean, because uh, perfect individuals in isolation do not exist. Of course, people are flawed. People will not probably live up to our expectations. That includes our parents, our partners, people we really like personally as well. But I think having a coherent, logical, rational approach to things as much as possible is the way to go. I mean, and this is a roundabout way of sort of, addressing something that you asked, that what can be done about it, right? I think independent thinking is
Mm.
absolutely critical. And that is something, and if you see the way education is taught, or if you see the vocabulary of education in our society, right? We are not encouraged for the large part to
Yes.
be independent critical thinkers. Just think of what happens in a school. Just think of what happens in our colleges. You are from a state in Andhra Pradesh. You are from Andhra Pradesh, right? I mean, you would know that Andhra Pradesh has this culture of IIT coaching classes starting at 4 in the morning, or
Yes.
of culture such as Narayana and Chaitanya of being educational jails,
Hmm.
where students are taught or prepared for IIT or coached for IIT for 15 to 16 hours,
Hmm.
and they are held captive. In
Yes.
such, what kind of people, what kind of thinkers would such a society produce? You tell me. The chances are very high that they will put all of their thinking, put all of their investment into somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happening, man.
I mean, 200 days of schooling. How many days have you questioned a teacher? How many
Of course,
people,
yeah.
right? So, but uh, do you think it is this cultish toxic fandomship that you're talking about? Is it unique to developing countries? As in, there are like heroes somehow become like the extensions of their own kind of aspirations, right? So, for example, if Michael Phelps was Indian, right, he would have temples by now, right? But who the hell, like, who the hell cares about Michael Phelps in America, right? I mean, they do care, but come on. Sachin's popularity versus Michael Phelps's popularity, both two equally great sportsmen in their own sports. Is it something unique to the developing countries, like Mo Salah in Egypt, or Drogba? Sorry, Pogba from Senegal or Nigeria? I don't remember. But is it something unique to our colonial developing countries who have been under colonial rule at some point?
I That's a very interesting question, and I honestly I don't think I have a straightforward answer to that,
Hmm.
because uh, I would I would like to do some thinking on my own on this, to be honest.
Mm.
But I mean, it's interesting that you say invoked an example of the US. I mean, at least in the sphere of entertainment,
Hmm.
in the 60s
Let me
and
let me pause you right there. You said, right, like
uh,
let's how many Olympic winners do we have, and how big a heroes they are, right? I mean, let's talk about Sania Mirza, right? So what did Sania Mirza, for all the achievements that she had in her entire career, great sporting career, she didn't win a Grand Slam single, right? And we adore the just miss. We adore PT Usha because she missed a bronze medal, right? J-
yeah.
Imagine how much of a legacy she has. But a guy like Michael Phelps in US has won freaking 24 some medals. I mean, if that happened to an Indian, is what I was pointing to, right? Sorry, you go on. I
Yes.
interrupted your answer.
No, 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 that's fine. I think that's an excellent point that you make. And I think you kind of furthered my point that I made at the start of the podcast about we lacking genuine role models. I
Hmm.
mean, if at all we have to see role models, see, what I feel is ascribing somebody the tag of a role model is pretty transactional, right? I
Mhm.
mean, you do something, you do something great, say in the realm of entertainment or sport or even politics or whatever, where maybe less so in politics, no, even in politics,
Yeah.
where achievement is more or less objectively measured, right?
Mm.
At least that's what makes you, I mean, for the large part, I mean, why do we adore Sachin? Because not just he was a great player, a
Mm.
great somebody who had impeccable technique, but he also went on to make so many runs. And if you make
Right.
so many runs, you make your team win matches.
Mm.
At the end of the day, that's what it is about, right?
Mm.
If you're a politician, you improve the lives of people.
Right.
You in a way that is that can be categorized by matrices and indices. You know, it can
Mm.
be measured.
Mm.
So is true for film stars as well. I mean, somebody who draws in crowds, who has a certain kind of appeal,
Mm.
but who also, I mean, is talented. Talented. Say, I mean, if you want to take examples of say Irfan Khan or Nawazuddin, people who don't
Yeah.
really draw in so many people in, but at least uh, there are so many. People judging their performance and they say that they are verifiably great. I mean, their
Right.
films go to these great festivals, you know, whatever. I mean, what
Right.
I'm saying is that even either literally or not, there is a way to say that this person is giving you something,
Mm.
a certain sense of joy,
Right.
metaphorically, whatever, or literally things. Now, I think that's kind of lacking in India, as again I said, in abundance,
Mm.
and that's where we have also kind of recalibrated our definition of excellence. And in so many conversations, when we say it's good, uh, what we are saying actually is that it's good, but it's good for India.
Mm.
Yeah, that it's good for us, you know,
Yes.
in that sense. And so I think that's something that's there. And when we see somebody who is really up there, right, and who is of say international standard. I mean, and this is a bit of a complicated discussion as well, as to do you really have to, like, what is international standard, what is Indian standard, and things like
Mm-hmm.
that,
Yeah.
and the way a Western gaze looks at and interprets and validates Indian standards. I'm not going into all of that
Mm.
because that will be beyond the scope of our conversation.
Mm.
But coming back to your point, actually, in things where you can objectively measure success,
Mm.
I think one can, and it does make me a little uncomfortable making that point as an Indian myself, that that I think there is a genuine dearth of people whom you can genuinely put up on pedestals. So when a few people come by like that,
Mm.
uh, we kind of become rabid about them. And
Exactly.
to answer your question, and to answer your question about the how pronounced it is in the West as opposed to, you know, countries battling the post-colonial condition. I again, I said I would like to do more research on this myself, and I think actually I would, because it's a good topic to think about. But I see in the field of entertainment, at least, there has been a culture of impersonators, so to speak,
Mm. I'll
in the West as well.
I'll give you some Western rabid Western examples, right? So when Dark Knight Rises came out, Christopher Nolan fans kind of attacked the film critics and kind of banned. Like, did they get a few?
Of course,
Yeah,
Rotten
you,
Tomatoes. Yeah,
exactly. You saw
exactly.
that,
Yeah, you're bang on. You're bang on. Exactly. Yeah.
and
See, so then,
the biggest fruit of them all, the very great example of Trump itself.
yeah, that's true as well. Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, so I don't think that, you know, it is just a sense of I mean, I don't think that it's such a simplistic extrapolation of that. Okay,
Hmm.
it is a condition that only afflicts population that has been historically deprived.
Hmm.
Although in the case of Trump, there is some genuine deprivation that has
Yeah, yeah,
happened with respect
that's a
to
different
the
story. Yep,
uh, the American middle class and the
yep,
working
yep,
class.
yep.
And it's also complicated by gets complicated by a bunch of factors.
Right.
But I think it also taps into this basic human nature of submission, in a sense,
Mm.
of surrendering yourself absolutely to somebody, because then that person will take care of you.
Hmm.
You don't have to take care of yourself. And isn't that the biggest liberating thing of all. I mean, finding finding freedom in captivity. Isn't
Mm.
that what fandom also is in a
Yes.
sense, you know?
Yes.
But I think also, I think a case can definitely be made about the proportion, you know.
Mm.
And
Mm.
as I said, that of course I haven't done a proper study or anything
Mm.
of what's happening in the Western countries vis-a-vis what's happening here and a few other countries with respect to fandoms.
Mm.
But I think what we see in India and in different spheres, right? I mean,
Right. Right.
right
Right.
from Rajnikant to Dhoni to Sachin and all of
Yeah.
that.
I mean,
Uh,
I want to point at one statement by this comedian called Chris Rock, right? He said, "Yeah, I mean, when a comedian like Robin Williams is performing, he's just a comedian who's performing, right? But when I'm performing, I'm not only performing for myself. If I succeed, I succeed for Black people. If I fail, I fail for Black people. So that is one more example that was coming to my mind when we were talking about this. This idea that you become the representation of the people that you come from, who have not seen too many." Successful people come up from their society, so they kind of become gods in a godly figures in a sense. uh, but even if we go dial our clock to a time before colonialism happened in India, are we a society that generally craves for an authoritative figure, right? If we really break it right down to the family level, right? I still see today, like, many youngsters are like in the awe of their elders or the successful ones in the family. They listen to them. Like, I had a friend, right? He once said, like, dude, I want to get married at the age of 27 because my XYZ uncle who earns like 50 lakhs per year, he said so. And what he knows, because he's in that position, right? So I'm like, dude, he's in that position because he is good at that thing, doesn't necessarily mean he's good at this thing. So I would love to see you take suggestions on how to get to that 50 lakh position, but I would really take everything else with a pinch of salt, right? So why is that basic common sense lacking out here? Or is
See,
it is it unique? I mean, I would extend it beyond India as well, South Asian in general. Maybe I'm not sure about any other region for that matter.
yeah, I think India is a country that
You let me interrupt. You made one point, right? In one of your posts, you said we are still when you're commenting on some Cricinfo's comment of retiring Dhoni's journey, and you're like, stop sucking up. We are still stuck in this feudal mindset kind of thing. Maybe you can use that
yeah,
point to elaborate what you're about to say.
sure, sure. I think I largely agree with your point. I think we do have a weird kind of we fetishize authoritarian figures. There is almost a bit of BDSM kind of a kink that I think Indians have, you know. Till the time you don't whip us, we don't think that you are useful. Till the time you don't tell us what to do, and that too with power, with anger, with some sense of punishment. I think we do not think that you are important enough to be listened to. And I think that is something that is really at the heart of a lot of things, you know.
Mm.
I mean, that is really at the heart of a lot of political anxieties. That is really at the
Yes.
heart of a lot of social, cultural anxieties. And that has really reached a pretty disturbing level in the last 5, 6, 7 years for sure, politically.
Mm.
And that is what that always acts as a trigger for me when I see people going batshit nuts about Dhoni, or figures like him, say Sachin, say Modi, say whatever, because it's all a through line. You know, these things are not isolated,
Mm.
and a lot of it really goes back to our family. It really goes
Yes.
back to the kind of people we look up to the kind of people we crave acceptance from, the kind of people we think are deserving of respect, and by and an extension of that, love.
Mm.
So I think this has been ingrained, and and we have, I mean, verifiable data points. You know,
Mm.
you will hear people casually saying that what India needs is military rule, that what India needs is a
Yes.
dictator. That yaar ek
Did
baar,
you see that Vijay Devarkonda statement by any chance?
yeah, of course, I saw that. I mean, no surprises there,
Yeah.
right? And he's a star, sure, but that's just not an outlier of a statement at all. That is something that, I mean, India. There should be a study done to to find out in how many countries, or to rank countries in which Hitler is normalized. I think India would be right up there. I'm not kidding. Uh,
I'll tell
uh,
you. I'll tell you an example. There was a movie called, so Chiranjeevi made movies on with a title called Hitler, with a title called Stalin, and no one blinked an eyelid. Like,
See, there you have it. That's a great point. Exactly. And I remember there was this. I remember reading this news item again, something I think in the mid 2000s, about there was this shop called Hitler. It was, I think, a tailor shop or something somewhere in Ahmedabad, and it was a big deal. It was one of the rare instances where Hitler, being so out in the public, had offended somebody, there was some controversy and all of that, and that person had to take it down or whatever. But the fact is, these kind of instances have been prevalent in India for a really long time. I mean, growing up, I used to hear that this person is very Hitler-like. This person is a disciplinarian, is a very strict figure, completely disregarding the fact that Hitler cannot be a complimentary adjective at all. I
yes,
mean, what the fuck? Uh, and it's just been, I mean, his autobiography is widely read and all of that. And I'm not advocating banning of anything, but we have a lot of innate fascination with these kind of authoritative dictatorial figures. A lot of middle class family will tell you that the period from 1975 to 1977, where India was under the rule of emergency, under Indira Gandhi's rule and all of that, things were so fine. Trains would run on time and all of that, and everything used to function so smoothly. And I think it is this sense of and a, and a lot of it again ties to a bit of, I mean, a large part of it ties to independent living, independent thinking, critically analyzing things for what they are. And in so many of these cases, uh, it just takes away everything, right? You do not, under a dictatorial rule, or when you have an authoritarian person controlling your destiny, you don't have to think about it yourself. And that's something that goes on in a family as well.
yes,
So many families have this dictatorial setup. I mean,
yes.
dissent is discouraged. There is one
If you're
party or one person.
if you're fine with the dissent at your home, you'll be fine at the dissent in your country.
Exactly, right?
Sorry,
Dissent is something that
yeah,
is,
anti-dissent.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Being comfortable with a dissenting opinion, right? I
Yes.
mean, that is absolutely discouraged at the level of family. That's absolutely discouraged at the level of nation. At least,
Yes.
again, in the last few years, it's
Hmm.
it's it's insane. We had anti-CA protests this year itself, and I could just see so many people who were a little cagey about it and things like that and whatever. So I think that is really something that is not isolated. Our love for
Hmm.
authoritarian figures, and I think it really has some kind of deep-seated conditioning that that leads us to behave in the way we do.
That's exactly what I was when I was talking to one girl yesterday who he said she said I like Modi, and I said why, and she said like he's the leader. I mean he brings together people, and she was giving me all the. I was like okay, GDP was like this in 2009, and it was like this, but no, but he he I like his presence. He looks like a leader, he talks like a leader, and he brings together people, and I could clearly see, maybe he was not, maybe she was not articulate as you are, but I could really see that thing entirely playing out in what she was saying. And to as an extension of this question, right? Do you think, as much as we hate China on the outside, do you think we really fetishize China in a sense, or this administration at least fetishizes China in a sense? Because when this coronavirus lockdown happened, right? Haven't you heard people appreciate China for like, whoa, they were so strict. They were like they were kind of bolting the doors of people so that they don't come out. That is the kind of that is the kind of thing that should happen for Indians also. Just so stupid. Have you heard things like that? Have you heard this weird fetishization?
Uh, so with respect to COVID and China, or the kind of examples that you're giving, I haven't myself, but I I won't be surprised. Again, uh, it's also that uh, all of us individuals, we have our own social realities,
Hmm.
and we all have our own echo chambers and things like that or whatever, so that also could have contributed to that. But I'm actually not a lot surprised by the kind of things that you've heard. And
Right.
coming back to that friend of yours
Hmm.
who was inarticulate in her admiration of Modi and whatever, I think a lot of people like Modi because Modi reminds them of their fathers.
Yeah.
Reminds them of their this kind of, somebody who will not talk to you when you want to talk, will always set an agenda, a mandate, will surprise you with these kind of weird rules and diktats and all of that. And when you do not have this real conception of what love is, then it gets really difficult to differentiate love from abuse. And also just it gets really confusing in a pretty amusing but also
Dangerous.
dangerous way. But
Right.
again, coming back to your question about the whole China and coronavirus and whatever, as I said, I have not heard of this example,
Hmm.
but it's just this sense of that. Uh, it again ties with our earlier discussions that
Hmm.
we are kind of really at home with the idea that if only we could hand our the keys of our house to somebody else, we would be very safe. I think that
Yes.
also comes with a lot of distrust with your own self.
Hmm.
And I think that distrust also has historical underpinnings with respect to definitely the education system that we were talking about, definitely with respect to what our family structures, definitely with respect to the sense of this genuine lack of people that one can look up to, the fact that dissent is structurally discouraged, and all of that, I think.
And let me make it very clear that we are not discouraging people to like not listen to elders, right? What I'm saying
No, of
is
course. Of
listen to
course.
your elders and treat it like Google, right? So it's like when you ask
Yeah.
Google the weather of your city, it will say just 31 degrees. It won't say 31 degrees, have some buttermilk and go out, right? So I mean, you take the information and you process it on your own because you are the one who should know you the best. I mean, obviously you will be the one who knows yourself the best, right? So I mean, just the lack of confidence people have to assume that they know a lot about them is
and and
yes.
and they get exploited. And again,
Yeah.
something that uh, the moment you said Google, something like a bulb came sparked in my head, and that's something to do with fake news. And
Hmm.
again, that is something not just an Indian phenomenon, that had such a huge role to play in the US, and I think will continue to play a huge
Hmm.
role in American politics. And I
Hmm.
think that also comes with the fact that uh, I mean, there can be different components to that, in the sense that where does gullibility in people come from,
Hmm.
and the fact that why do people not cross-check information? That's something simple, right?
Right.
Now, that can be answered or thought about in different ways. People
Hmm.
don't want to cross-check. People don't cross-check because they don't want to cross-check. Now, why do they not want to cross-check? Because it tugs a certain bit of their prejudice or a certain bit of their whatever. Second, why do they not want to cross check, or why do they not cross check? Sorry, is the fact that just a pretense of something that looks knowledgeable is enough. And why is it that is enough, or why is it that something that just sounds so ludicrous on the surface is the fact that they do not, again, it sort of comes back to independent critical thinking,
Yes.
or this lack of confidence, or this lack of uh, thinking that what is in front of you is something that's not beyond you. Is something that, I
Mm,
mean, this is not fucking rocket science. Yeah, this is not something
yes.
a
We
vaccination for corona.
we treat way too many things as rocket science in this country.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see things for yourself. You
Mm,
can process, interpret things for yourself. It's not, I mean, it was a bit like that you were told that this is the syllabus for the first term exam in school. You have 4 chapters, just cram the heck out of them. And if a question came from some other chapter, or so to speak, in a math exam, if they changed the variable names, or if they changed the whatever, a lot of people would get bamboozled,
mm,
including me.
yeah.
So it's this thing that we are still stuck in school in a sense. We are
Yep.
still operating in this sense of a weird kind of syllabus, a weird kind of test that we have to somehow prepare
Yes.
for, and there is no test. We know that. So I think a lot of that comes from that kind of mentality, I suppose.
And that mentality is the reason, like, I kind of think, I mean, controversial statement again, I think we overrate our elders way too much. I mean, the
Oh
fact that
yeah,
we called bhaiya itself, right? No one calls anyone. I mean, I have interviewed people on this podcast who are like 30 years elder to me, foreign folks, and I call them with name. I mean, everyone else is, I mean, Amitabh Bachchan is called Amit ji in Bollywood, and in Hollywood is just Amit, right? And nothing against Amitabh Bachchan. I'm kind of pointing at the culture that uh, these guys are like, it's like everything they say is Bible, everything they say is Veda, and there are millions of people who think like that. And because of that thinking, right, because of this lack of ability to like think on their own feet, I mean, elders get a pass for being sexist, racist, and sometimes they get away with kind of, sometimes in some cases they get away with sexual abuse as well, right? Because wo aise kaise karenge? Like, how can he do it? He's the elder of the family, right? So it's that thing that I'm trying to point at.
yeah, and I think this really happens as well also because the sense of hierarchy comes
Mm,
very naturally to Indian society. And if you see that, that again has nothing to do with colonialism at all.
yeah.
That goes back 2000 years, more than that, and towards caste
Mm,
system,
mm,
right? So I think we are just very comfortable. We are very okay. In fact, probably it's not even far fetched to say that maybe that's the kind of response that comes naturally to us. I mean, we are
mm,
most comfortable responding to a hierarchical structure,
mm.
and not just in terms of fandom or in terms of looking at say celebrity or whatever, but everywhere. Yeah, matlab, we don't call people by first names if somebody is
Yes.
a senior. Calling somebody sir comes really naturally to us. I remember when I was an undergrad student in the
Mm,
US, there was this professor I really respected and all of that. And there was this one time I approached him after the class got over and I had a question. And that guy was genuine legend. I mean, no doubt about that. And I called him sir, and I was very cognizant of the fact that he would say that don't call me sir, call me X, and he did tell me that. But even when I met him the next time, I, I, I knew that, that this person is so worthy of genuine respect, and I really come from the kind of family structure when it's a typical Hindu family, whatever, where you have to touch elders' feet when you are meeting them and all of that all the time, blah, 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 whatever. Uh, so I just could not
none
refuse.
of that happens because out of love. It is out of,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's
I mean,
again
I would
part of
touch my
discipline.
father's feet when I truly feel the love for him.
Exactly. Yeah. But again, it's part of the syllabus. It's again
Mm,
some exam that we are busy preparing ourselves for God knows what. So then, so when I went in the second time, I knew that I should be calling him by his first name, and I'm somebody who I thought that is not given into these things, and I'm usually comfortable with addressing people with their first names if they're 10 to 20 years older to me and things like that, because
mm,
boss, that's your name. I'm not
mm.
disrespecting you.
Yep.
But even somebody like me, I think I just could not, and this is 10 years ago, sure,
Mm,
I was uh, young, but
mm,
still, I mean, I remember that moment. I remember
mm,
having that kind of mini conversation with myself, and I thought that, like years later, you think about it, that I'm kind of brought up in a culture where recognizing or calling an individual by their name and just recognizing their existence or by whatever, by who they are, is not enough. They have to be elevated, and you have
Mm.
to be, this sense of
Yeah.
power dynamics, this sense of the bizarre kind of power structure really comes naturally to us. And to answer your question about how people that we're so comfortable with people occupying the apex of the pyramid, and
Mm.
we giving them whatever. I mean, that's exactly, again, as I said, that's caste system for you in a large part, right? Where
Mm.
uh, say Brahmins, for I mean, that continues even till date. That
Yeah.
it's
Do you think there is a connection between that system and the reason why we still call one seniors who are 1 year elder to us as bhaiya or brother or sir or whatever?
I mean, I wouldn't make that much of
That connection, but no,
a
no, that route would be very twisty and turvy, but there must be some thread.
yeah. I mean, probably,
The
but
existence
it's
of
also,
hierarchy, and
yeah.
the craving to address someone from the position of their hierarchy rather than
Yeah,
who they are, right? I mean, the
yeah,
the
yeah.
the addressing of sir should come very naturally, right? Because I was doing a podcast last episode with a music composer who's phenomenally talented, and he's 5 years younger to me, and I called him sir, and it's that is my way of
I know.
addressing his
Showing
presence
respect.
in the hierarchy of talent, which is it okay? That's debatable, but at least it's better than the hierarchy of age, for example.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And just the fact that it's just being, I think, comfortable with which I don't think we should be ideally,
Mm,
or at least this overstatedness of respect. I mean, in a
yes.
lot of cases, respect should come naturally, and it should be very organically.
Mm,
Uh, uh, it should be very organically perceptible that
mm,
I like you, I
yeah.
respect you, and that should be reflected in the way I talk to you,
Yeah.
the way I listen to you, the way I respond to you, and things like that. You don't really need to go out there and
Yeah,
make these things.
and
And
it's like it's something that white people won't understand, right? Because it's like I have because ever since I've joined my corporate life, it's been a common insistence that I have to address everybody with the first name, regardless of how senior they are. And I call people in my office who are 10 years elder to me. I don't call them sir, but I have a college senior who till date, and it's been 13 years since I've left college. And it's not that I hate that guy. I love that guy. He's one of my favorite seniors. Encouraged me a lot in college, and I still call him bhaiya or anna in Telugu, brother, big brother in English. And I just cannot explain why that is the case. Because I cannot imagine calling him anything else. Because that's what I've been used to, and this is something I can't explain,
yeah,
especially to people outside the South Asian
of
community. You know
course.
what I mean?
and and a lot of that, again, that also comes back to how we were raised, right? This
Mm,
concept of family, and again what we were taught in school and things like that. And it's very difficult to unlearn that. It's very difficult to
yes.
break those shackles.
Yeah.
And when you grow up, those kind of things, uh, given the hierarchical ease of Indian society and a bunch of things,
Mm,
becomes something else altogether, and
right.
it kind of becomes almost uniquely Indian, if
Mhm.
not say uniquely South Asian as
Yeah,
well.
patriarchy is the kind of thing. Patriarchy exists in the West as well, but it kind of fits perfectly, tailor made for the way we operate, right? So in a sense,
Yeah,
and because
yeah,
it's more likely to stick around than other countries, I would assume,
definitely.
right?
And different kinds of toxicity also,
Mm,
where a very lopsided power equation, or where a
mm,
very lopsided power dynamics lends itself to different kinds of exploitative relationships,
yeah.
different kinds of exploitative what should I call, different kinds of exploitative situations,
Mm,
which can be abusive, but they can also be very naturally wrapped in things such as love, things such as honor, things such as respect, decorum, and whatever. And I think then it gets
yeah.
really, really vicious.
And even if something good comes out of it, right? For example, people usually point me to the example of Singapore, right? Singapore was developed because there was this great dictator, and because he was the great dictator, he did not allow anybody else, so he developed, right? So, but one have to really point get a little deeper and look at the fact that on a majority, for majority of the human beings get corrupt and get weird and get egoistical when they have too much power in hand, and Singapore was an exception.
That, and also, I mean, I haven't again looked much into Singapore
Same.
to make a declarative statement. And over the
But
last,
huh,
I'll just finish
yeah,
and then you can.
right.
And over the last 4 5 years, at least during political or these kind of discussions, I have seen that people just tend to bullshit a lot. That, I mean,
Mm,
they would just say things that have no basis in reality. So I don't know as of now that if dictatorial regime led to the Singapore's development. That's one. Second is
even
the
if it
fact
is,
that,
it's not good.
yeah, sure. And second is people just use all kinds of false equivalences. And I'll tell you this: India is a country of 1.3 billion people,
Mm,
of more than 2 dozen states.
mm,
Singapore is almost as big as what? Delhi?
mm.
I mean, you can't fucking compare an ant to an elephant with respect to functioning. I mean, there has to be proportionality. I mean, comparison is fundamentally a mathematical concept. You can't compare 1 milligram to 100 kgs. Yeah, that's just dishonest and doesn't stand up. That's not how
Yeah,
things are supposed to be. To say that and even that, you just need to flip through the pages of history to see what a basic dictatorial regime does to people. And even if
yeah,
it would have been fine, would you be okay bloody living in a place where you do
yeah.
not have any kind of have you heard this kind of arguments from people saying that Singapore had XYZ and you're
Yeah, I
that
mean,
whatever.
there was basically they only have one political party, and they only have few prime ministers. There is no opposition. I think they are the, maybe if I'm wrong on this, they are the only developed country with with capital punishment, I guess, and that is, and it's very hard to like speak up against the regime over there, and they're doing good. But
No,
human
no, I
beings.
was asking. Sorry, I was asking something else. I was asking that have you heard people make that argument that
Yeah.
because Singapore is dictatorial in its intent and whatever
No, the
mechanics,
point is the sense that they are coming from is like, because they didn't have opposing people always fighting in politics, because they had one party, one system, they developed
got
because
it,
they had
got it,
one
got
vision.
it.
I mean,
Is
yeah,
that
lucky for you that they had good vision.
is that what people tell you? Is what I'm
Yep,
interested in knowing.
yep, yep.
Okay,
Some,
got it, got it.
yep,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, sure, sure. I got that. I got that. That's what I wanted to know. Okay, fair.
And yeah, and for every one Singapore, I would point at 10 Libyas or 10, Iraqs or whatever, because human beings and power, it doesn't go well.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
coming to this point, right? We are talking about, you were talking about bullshitting more bullshitting recently. Is it coincidence that bullshitting has increased with the rise of social media, in a sense that are we becoming more averse to opposing view as time passes by, because social media is literally making literally making us beings of bubble, in a sense.
I think so. I think so. And uh, I mean, there are also like different dimensions to all of that to this discussion, but at a very basic sense,
Hmm.
I think so. And because social media just gives you this sense to edit your own life
Mm.
and to edit your own life, to watch your own film and to choose your own actors, right? You can mute somebody on Twitter. You can unfollow somebody on Facebook. You can obviously unfollow somebody on Twitter as well, unfriend somebody on Facebook, things like that, right? Hide somebody, sorry, on Facebook and whatever, right? So then it's essentially what you see is what you want to see.
Mm.
That's not necessarily is the complete picture. That at
Mm.
least is the picture that you want to see, and that cuts across ideologies, right?
Yep.
It doesn't matter whether you're centrist, liberal, right wing, whatever.
Mm.
And I think there's also the sense of being so certain about our own realities and this certainty of conviction,
Mm.
because we live in a messy world. We live
Yeah.
in a really complicated Uh, and I mean, the world was always complicated at
Mm.
varying degrees and all of that. But
Yeah.
right now, that complication gets a new tinge because there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of resentment, there's a lot of self-righteousness as well. There is a lot of sanctimony, there's a lot of value judgments, and there's a lot of, you know, there's always this sense of barbed wires being constructed all around
Yes.
us, or as communities, or as whatever. So I think sorry, what was the question? Has this sense of bullshitting increased in the age of
Yeah,
social media, or
with the rise of social media, has the amount of bullshitting increased in a sense, that the certainty with which people spread nonsense in a sense, right? So
exactly? I
yeah.
mean, because then you're surrounded yourself. See, if you're lying, what's the problem with lying? If you take away the moral aspect of it, the fact that you'll be called out, the fact
Mm.
that you'll probably be shamed for it, and XYZ things, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Now, if you surround yourself with 50 liars and all of them believe in the same lie, and then if you're lying, then of course nobody's gonna call out, because
yeah.
that is the whole purpose of that ecosystem. And even if you
Mm.
go outside that echo chamber
Mm.
momentarily to in a more sane world, or in a world that does not automatically share your social reality and beliefs and whatever,
Mm.
you will carry that sense of confidence.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I
Yes.
see people, even liberals and whatever, these so-called nice people,
Mm.
talking things which really do not have a lot of basis in reality, but say that with a lot of conviction,
Mm.
because that's what you get used to. And again, I mean, I should
That's
not be the one to saying
that
that it's
yeah,
such a
maybe we
dangerous
are,
thing.
right? That's the beauty of the bubble, right? That's the weirdness of the
Yeah,
bubble. Maybe we are.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And even this, a conversation like this is also a part of the bubble, right?
Yes.
I
Yep.
mean, uh, probably we wouldn't have been chatting if our worlds were so completely different. You
Mm.
get my point, right?
Mm.
And I'm not saying that's necessarily good
And
or bad or
even
whatever.
if I
It
chat,
is
I will
what
be
it
very
is.
stressed out. Yeah.
Yeah, so would I be, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing, yeah. Matlab, it's just gotten very intense, and it's gotten really hostile. And I'm
Mm.
not making any new point with respect to
and
this.
and,
At
and and
least
I don't
people
see
know that.
any end light at the end of the tunnel, right? Because this is a capitalist society, and the social media companies will do anything and everything in their power to keep your eyeballs glued. And as a part of that, they will suggest what you love again and again, over and over again. And you suggest the truth enough time, you suggest the lie enough times, it becomes your truth.
Exactly. And I recently saw this documentary on Netflix. It's called The Social Dilemma. Have you
Mm.
watched it?
I have not yet, because of bandwidth and time issues. But go on. I've heard a lot
Okay.
about it. There
Yeah,
are people. Yeah.
I would. That's exactly. I mean, that's what you just said is
Mm.
exactly one of the things that's shown in the documentary, and you're bang
Hmm.
on with respect to that. That you know, I mean, we have all been locked in this
Mm.
prison of social media,
Yep.
and the keys have been thrown out.
Mm.
And the perversely funny part of all of this is that we don't know that we are in captive, right?
Mm.
And that's how this cycle perpetuates itself. The fact that and not just Facebook or Twitter, but also things such as Amazon, even Google.
Mm.
I mean, they are playing you. We are not even
Yes.
people for them. We are not even people for them. We are
A click.
some yeah, exactly. We are some kind of machines that are responding to a certain kind of pattern, stimuli,
Mm.
and things like that. And we are being played like that, and which is also one of the reasons why fake news also spreads so easily and so rapidly on
Mm.
social media. Why did it not spread so quickly when there was no internet? I mean,
Mm.
of course, there were fake news from since forever, right? But just the fact that a certain kind of technological structure or medium aids a few things, and our lives have just become so intricately a part of it, is a thing of
Right.
100%.
And have you heard this suggestion from Edward Snowden on, I think on Joe Rogan's podcast? He said like maybe there should be some charitable social media organization which comes up with the idea that the algorithm that it designs, like when whatever you click, it will show something that is opposite to that. So maybe if you're clicking something feminist, maybe it will show you something like something that adores patriarchy, or the reverse. If you're watching something patriarchal, it shows you something feminist. I but this won't happen there is no profit running behind it, so this is not going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. And I and I don't know. And then this is a very interesting thought experiment for sure.
Mm,
And but again, there is no way to say that how beneficial would that be? Would it
mm,
see now our societies are imploding, and in a sense, after implosion, there's also an explosion in different
mm,
kinds that we are seeing.
yeah,
Would that just lead to an outright explosion? I don't know. I mean, would it make people even more insular?
yeah.
Would it make people even more? I don't know. There's no way to say. Although
we
it's,
we
I mean, I'm not dismissive of this thought
mm,
experiment, but although it's slightly naive because I don't think it's gonna happen,
right.
or even if it happens, it would have enough people for it to
Mm,
for that thought experiment
yeah.
to be successful. And it's obviously it's just an idea. It needs to be more thought about and all of that.
Right. and
But
and
it's
yeah,
definitely a change
and the
from the
existing
effort we make in
structures that
ourselves.
we have in our society and what social media companies do, it's like a hook and a claw, right? It just fit together
Yeah,
perfectly.
exactly.
And I don't know if we'll ever live in a world where we accidentally stumble upon a new idea or a new thought or a different thought that we thought was completely opposite to ours, right? So are you hopeful, or are you are you pessimistic about the way our entire how can we put it, our entire I don't know what the phrase what's the phrase I'm looking for. How is our entire conscious going towards? Are we becoming more critical? Will we become more critical, independent, or will we not as a country?
I
And
mean,
whenever I say country in India, I believe I can safely extend that to South Asia as well.
uh, see, my thing is, I'm not. I mean, contrary to what my many of my posts or some of my writing may suggest, I'm not a cynic,
Yeah.
and I am not a pessimist as well. I
Hmm.
mean, I love this line about cynic is that I somebody said, I'm forgetting the author, and go something like, I tried being a cynic, but
Mm,
then I gave up.
mm.
I don't think there is a lot of value in cynicism.
Right.
It just tires you, doesn't do anything else.
Yep.
So I mean, and it's also taking the easy way out and
Mm,
just saying that nothing's gonna change, nothing's gonna
mm,
matter. So there's this whole nihilistic view of things. I would like to think that I'm fundamentally not that. I'm like any other person who also gets irritated and whatever. But
mm.
so that said, though, I mean, it is definitely an uphill task,
Right.
and it's also for people on themselves. And I have noticed some a few positives. I mean, and I know it almost sounds trivial is that I'm bringing Dhoni and IPL and whatever into this again.
Yes.
So when I started watching IPL, and coming back to the question that you had asked, and I think we just got
Mm,
sidetracked in a different conversation. So
mm,
I started to watch IPL this year just for Dhoni, and also, and not because I wanted to see him fail, but because I was a bit emotional when he declared his retirement on 15th August, and
mm,
IPL came. And I used to watch a lot of his videos after his retirement. I was really missing the guy, and I thought in this IPL he would be a different Dhoni.
mm,
But I think the moment he started reverting to the same Dhoni, I kind of started to watch the IPL just for CSK matches,
mm.
and just to see that if just to hope that Dhoni performs terribly and CSK gets booted out. And I didn't have to hope a lot. That's really what happened. But you know what I started doing? I started going to these random CSK Facebook fan pages,
Yes.
its official page, the ICC page, the Cricinfo page, and they were obviously continuing their Dhoni Bhakti and all of that. But I was very interested in knowing what an average fan feels.
Mm,
And this time, in stark contrast to 2017 or 18 or even 19 World Cup, people were actually criticizing Dhoni, and they were criticizing Dhoni with solid points. Some people
Right.
were just, of course, just very frustrated. They were typically betrayed
Yeah.
CSK fans, which I get, no problem. But some people just were criticizing Dhoni very rationally and not
Mm.
being abusive and not being, incoherent about it. And I really like that. And I did this exercise at least 15 to 20 times, maybe even
Mm.
more,
Mm.
and I thought that, okay, there is some resistance, there is some sort of introspection in a sense, there's some bit of critical thinking. Of course, this also came after a lot of obvious mistakes and all of that. And
Mm.
obviously, I'm not extrapolating this to the future of our consciousness
Yeah, yeah,
as a
yeah, yeah.
country and all of
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
based on a few Facebook comments. But what I'm saying is, I think largely it boils down to individuals. It just
Yes.
boils down to people who are ready and who are basically willing to think on their own,
Mm.
who are not subscribing to this notion of a fixed syllabus, who are not so taken in by some nebulous rules which may or may not exist,
Mm.
things like that.
Mm.
Now, we are a country of 1.3 billion, and there's also, like, so many people, more than 50% of the people do not have access to basic information,
Yep.
or internet and things like
Mm.
that. But even people who do, say 400 or 500 million people who can access internet,
Mm.
can finish schools and things like that, whatever, college as well. I think it just comes down to them. And I really can't make a blanket statement that, they will or whatever and things like that.
Mm.
But I think they will have to. We will have to. There is no other option.
Yes.
And I can only say that I hope we do. I hope
Mm.
we do. And uh, it's we will keep wading into trickier waters if we don't.
Yep.
And maybe by the time we really want to wake up, we find out that we are engulfed in an infinite night. I hope
Mm.
that doesn't happen.
Right.
And I hope that, and which is why I think it is important that we are vocal, that people who
Yes.
think that they can see a spot bullshit,
Mm.
it doesn't matter whether they're right or wrong, or
Mm.
things like that, but just the fact that they have something to say which goes against the conventional wisdom.
Mm.
See, just like that Jim Emerson piece on Nolan, and
Yes.
that it helped you open a window, right?
Yep.
Which was in a sense shut. So I
Yep.
think we need more people like that. We need more
Mm.
people to question existing structures, systems, the sense of overarching hierarchy and things like that. I think if a lot of people do that, I think there is some chance.
Right. What a perfect note to end this podcast, folks. Keep thinking, and hopefully, this podcast also will start to be a little more vocal about stuff. And on that note, thank you very much, Tanul, for doing this. Thank you very much, folks,
My
for
pleasure.
listening. If you've been listening this long, that's it from the Solo Cups podcast. Till we see you next time. Bye, everyone.